This meeting of the Honourable Senate for Friday, September 9, 2022 is called to order. Before we begin the business of the day, Senator Janice Allen is seeking the approval of the Senate to join us by Zoom. Those in favor? Thank you very much. Welcome, Senator Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. You're hearing us. Before we move on to public business, I've asked Her Excellency Judith Slater, British High Commissioner to Jamaica, and Dr. Gary Connolly, Resident Coordinator of the United Nations, who both are visiting us today, to join us in the President's bench. Also, I'm going to ask you just to recognize Ms. Malicia Malcolm. Stand up, please, Ms. Malcolm. Our members will have occasion to interact with Ms. Malcolm. She is the Executive Assistant to the Clerk of the House of Parliament. So I ask you to welcome the three of them to be in the Parliament. The members of the Honourable Senate would no doubt be aware of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and I'm sure that the news of Her Royal Highness's passing met with sadness from both sides of this Honourable Senate. The Queen, during her long reign, visited Jamaica, I think, 5 times or more, I think 5 times, and many Jamaicans have fond memories of interacting with her. On the last occasion she visited and addressed the chamber, she ended her presentation with the following: "I wish you well as you face the challenges of the present and the future, and I pray God's blessing upon all of you as you seek to build a brighter tomorrow." Those were her wishes, and we continue to cling to the sentiment attached in those words. I wish to, through the British High Commissioner, extend to the members of the royal family our deep condolences on the passing of Her Majesty, who much has been said and will be said, but it is suffice to say that she has made an indelible mark on the history of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, and indeed the world. Thank you. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. President, and allow me to join also in welcoming Her Excellency Judith Slater and His Excellency Dr. Connolly, both very good friends of Jamaica, who join us on this solemn occasion, during this solemn period in Jamaica. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, Jamaica's former head of state, passed away in her Scotland home of Balmoral Castle yesterday, Thursday, the 8th of September 2022, at the age of 96 years, after 70 years and 214 days on the throne, the longest of any British monarch. The Queen, in famous and profound remarks made at the age of 21, declared that her whole life, whether it be long or short, would be devoted to service. Indeed, Queen Elizabeth lived a life of service to the people of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the territories of the Commonwealth, marked by grace, poise, and charm. Always exercising the dignity befitting her on whose head rested the crown, Queen Elizabeth was a continuous source of quiet strength and a stabilizing force throughout many epochs as the world evolved during her 7 decades on the throne. Jamaica well remembers her visits, the first of which took place in November 1953 as the newly appointed head of state. She subsequently visited in 1966, 1975, 1983, 1994, and in 2002, the year of her Golden Jubilee. On her 6th and last visit, she addressed a joint sitting of our Parliament, which she described as the first of the independent parliaments of the Caribbean. Ever wise, Her Majesty in that address also observed that this Parliament has been, and I quote, one of the significant institutions for the fashioning and strengthening of our democratic society, creating many important laws to protect the rights of citizens and to promote Jamaica's effective participation in the global economy through international trade. As we come to the end of an era, Jamaica joins with the British royal family, the government and people of the United Kingdom, other realm countries, and all the territories in mourning the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. May her soul rest in eternal peace and light perpetual shine upon her. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Scott Motley, I recognize you from a seat other than your own.
Mr. President, I acknowledge the presence of the High Commissioner, Judith Slater, and of Dr. Cooney, and welcome them to the sitting. I extend my condolences on behalf of the opposition to the members of the royal family and the people of the United Kingdom on the passing of Queen Elizabeth, the head of the Commonwealth. The death of Queen Elizabeth has stunned persons all across the globe, because although she was 96, many felt that she was immortal, even as they watched her change from a radiant, beautiful 25-year-old to become the matriarch of the Commonwealth nations and beyond. Her life was embedded in her sense of duty. And she started at a very young age when she actually joined the army as a truck mechanic. That is a most unusual occupation for someone third in line to the throne. At the age of 21, when she promised to dedicate her life to the Commonwealth, whether that life be long or short, she made a promise which she intended to keep. And the Queen has championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56. It is interesting to hear the comments now that the Queen has passed, because there's a common thread throughout everything that one says. They speak to her quiet dignity, her stoicism, her sense of confident leadership. And I think that that is what will be missed the most. You saw her during COVID. I'll never forget that one. She was wearing a green dress and a green hat. And she very calmly said, "We will meet again as friends. We will meet again as family. We will all meet again." And in the midst of the confusion, the insecurity brought to the world by COVID, that calm voice made you feel it's going to be all right. She had a particular love for Jamaica. And as the minister has said, visited us on several occasions. But I will never forget her equanimity, her calmness, her demeanor when she had a power cut at King's House and just went sailing right along. Her wit and her charm was very obvious on that occasion, and I think it endeared her even more to Jamaicans. One of the remarks she made, which will always resonate with me as I serve this country, is a reminder that there is nothing wrong with doing something you regret. Because it was in Dublin Castle in Ireland that she said, with the benefit of historical hindsight, we can all see things we could have done differently, or not at all, or not at all. And so on this occasion, on this special occasion, when we reflect on the life of Queen Elizabeth, we reflect on a life of dignity, a life of quiet assurance, a life of grace and elegance. We reflect on a woman who was queenly, but kind, compassionate, down to earth. I leave this Senate with the words which he said at her coronation. I cannot lead you into battle. I do not give you laws or administer justice, but I can do something else. I can give my heart and devotion to these old islands and to all the peoples of the brotherhood of the nations. And she did. May her soul rest in peace, and may she take flight into the great beyond, if it pleases you.
Members of this Honourable Senate will rise and observe 2 minutes of silence. May the soul of Elizabeth, your daughter, rest in peace, and light eternal shine on her. Thank you. Just to say thank you very much, High Commissioner, for spending the morning with us. I know you have to be off, but it was a pleasure seeing you. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following: Ministry Paper number 56 of 2022 and Jamaica Deposit Insurance Corporation Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements for the year 2021. Ministry Paper number 57 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Financial Sector Adjustment Company Limited for the year 2019-2020. Ministry Paper number 58 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Financial Institution Services Limited for the year ended 2019-2020. Ministry Paper number 59 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Financial Sector Adjustment Company Limited for the year 2020-2021. Ministry Paper number 60 of 2022 and Annual Report of the Financial Institution Services Limited for the year ended 2020-2021. Ministry Paper number 61 of 2022 and Annual Reports of the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission for the years ended 2019-2020 and 2020-2021. Annual Ministry Paper number 62 to 68 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated March 7, 14, 21 and 28 and April 4, 11 and 20 and 25 of 2020 respectively. Ministry Paper numbers 69 to 75 of 2022 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated May 2, 16 and 30 and June 6, 13, 20 and 27 respectively. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Jamaica Civil Aviation Authority for the year 2020-2021. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica for the year 2019-2020. The Auditor General's Department Performance Audit Report of the Urban Development Corporation dated August 2022. Annual Report of the Jamaica Business Development Corporation for the year 2018-2019, and Annual Report of the Office of the Political Ombudsman for the year 2020.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
The following is a message from the Speaker of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 7th day of September 2022, a bill shortly entitled the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022 was passed in the House of Representatives. Signed, Marissa Dalrympe-Philibert, CD, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Mr. President, I signify my willingness to take charge of the bill.
A bill shortly entitled the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022 read a first time.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill.
Thank you, Minister Samuda. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers. I'm sorry.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, I will move the following motion. Be it resolved that the Senate thank His Excellency the Governor General for his gracious speech delivered to both Houses of Parliament on the 10th day of February 2022, approve the plans and programs outlined in his gracious speech, and place on record its appreciation of the performance of the government during the financial year 2021-2022.
Thank you, Senator Rodrigues Campbell. Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public Business Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as perhaps might even be befitting, although not planned in this way, the agenda for this morning's sitting will be fairly limited, although we anticipate that it will be productive and useful. Indeed, we will proceed with the opening of the State of the Nation debate and the very first contribution within that debate, even as we note that the schedule for the full proceedings of the debate is to be established. That is the sole matter on the agenda for this morning. I thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute, please. Thank you, Minister. Senator Rodriguez, just.
President, just before Senator Rodriguez, the motion has been moved, but isn't there a requirement?
Yes.
Mr. President, I hereby move for suspension of the standing orders to enable me to commence the debate on the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Members would have heard the question. Those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Senator Rodriguez.
The Senate has already acknowledged the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, but I still feel the need to just say in my own words that I wish Her Majesty's soul rest in peace. Mr. President, I stand here today with humility in my heart to open the 2022 State of the Nation debates. This is my second time participating in the debates, and it is still an honor to do so. It is a great honor to serve in Jamaica's Parliament and to today provide a perspective on what is taking place within our country. I remember last year when my Senate colleague, Don Webby, opened these debates, he predicted with much confidence that Jamaica would find solutions towards a full recovery with a view to building back stronger following on the effects of COVID-19 on not just Jamaica, but the wider world. Senator Webby, you were correct. Jamaica is on a path of recovery in all our industries, including the entertainment and entrepreneurial sectors, which had both taken big hits with the closures that had accompanied efforts to mitigate the effects of the pandemic. Once again, Jamaica and Jamaicans are able to enjoy reggae and dancehall music at live concerts. What a joy to be from a country that helps to entertain the world. Once again, businesses are getting an opportunity to thrive and to grow with the economic policies and plans which form part of the governance of this country. Mr. President, while I was not in this House in 2019, it should be remembered that Senator Samuda, in his opening of the State of the Nation debates at the time, stated that he had chosen to not print copies of his speech for distribution, but would instead share by email. I supported the call then, as I do now, and indicate, before going any further, that this speech will be emailed as hard copies are not available. As Senator Samuda called for in 2019, the same I do now in asking that we find a way in this Parliament to move away from the distribution of large amounts of paper that we see weekly in both houses. It is time for the default to be e-versions of documents with members requesting hard copies as needed. Let's save the trees. Yes, Senator Gale. Go green. The intention today is to speak to our country and the ideology surrounding its governance while suggesting ideas to help her along the journey to being stronger and better. Before doing so, though, I need to make a few points which it would be remiss of me not to mention. The first of such points, Mr. President, is Jamaica's 60th anniversary of independence, our Diamond Jubilee. What a time to be alive in Jamaica, a time when we celebrate and reflect. Our recently passed emancipation and independence celebrations ignited us as a people. Right across the country, we could see fire in eyes and that sense of pride in being Jamaican. The word reignition comes to mind. Across social media platforms, we could note the celebrations across the diaspora and in far-flung countries such as France and within the Middle East. There was evidence that Jamaica's Jubilee is a big deal. Mr. President, we need to wholeheartedly thank Ministers Olivia Babsy-Grange and Alando Terrelong and their teams at the Ministry of Gender, Entertainment and Sports, along with the Jamaica Cultural Development Commission and the Ministry and Minister of Tourism for all the efforts at home and abroad to showcase a series of celebratory events that shows why Jamaica is a place of majesty and awesomeness. Mr. President, colleagues, not even the removal of the green from Jamaica-themed murals and decorations from seemingly unknown but troubled quarters could dampen the celebrations. Mr. President, the black, gold, and green, what joy it brings to us all. I use this opportunity to call on all Jamaicans to ignore politics when it comes to our country, to our patriotism, and to civic pride. When it comes to our national colors, we must all wear them proudly, just as we must all seek to attend events that celebrate Jamaica, no matter who is at the helm of leadership at the time. It would have made for a healthy sight to behold if there were pictures of significant numbers of both JLP and PNP members celebrating our Jubilee in our national colors, in the National Stadium, across our parishes, and at events that were held right through the period. It is one Jamaica, no matter what. I say with surety that if in the future another party is in power in Jamaica, I will be attending emancipation and independence celebrations just as I did this year. There are some among us who would say I am making that comment to stir waters, but no, in my lifetime, I will live to see where we are all one united Jamaica. More than ever, Mr. President, we must reflect during this Jubilee year. We must reflect on where we are coming from as a nation since 1962 and where we would like to see Jamaica in 2082, 60 years from now. Mr. President, not only will 2022 be remembered as a year when Grand Gala was amazing, when right across the country, town squares and event areas were abuzz with activities. Let me not forget to highlight the drone show across Kingston City and in Montego Bay. Thanks for the reminder. We don't want any jealousy from, Charles, especially today. This year, 2022, will also be the year when the second issue I choose to raise take place, the 15th Population and Housing Census. We expect the process to begin shortly, And it would be remiss of me to not remind of the importance of this activity and hope every person of influence will encourage our people to participate. Mr. President, I look forward to seeing Senator Floyd Morris, for example, publicly encourage his communities, including that of the church and persons with disabilities, to participate in the census, as I also look forward to hearing Senator Gabriella Morris encourage the youth population and Senators Gale and Brown lobbying and encouraging their union members to be at the forefront of the upcoming census. All hands on deck for one Jamaica. I will quote our country's Minister of Finance in reminding us why participation in the census is of utmost importance. Mr. Clerk said, and I quote, "The census is one of the most important tasks that we will be undertaking in this our Jubilee year. The results will help us to assess our progress as a nation and guide us in setting our priorities and direction for the next 60 years and beyond. In this House, we know the value of data, and our best decisions have been informed and guided by the information provided by the census over the years. But the census information is more than a tool for policymakers in government. It is a critical source of information for businesses and the people of Jamaica. Critical decisions are informed by the data coming out of the census." Close quotations. As he said, the census is a big deal, and especially for a country like ours, which now operates not on whims and fancy, but through empathy with every single Jamaican and from the use of data and research to guide what will make Jamaica even stronger and better for her citizens. Regularly, when one watches news from other countries, there are stories of defaulted loans, stories of food shortages, stories of other perilous effects on countries due to not only the COVID-19 pandemic, the worst global pandemic in a century, but also the ongoing war in Ukraine and the resulting high levels of global inflation. Mr. President, this is the highest level of global inflation in 40 years. There can be no doubt that the world as a whole is facing some challenging times. Through it all, though, Jamaica, while facing these challenges, has been able to wade through the troubled waters without drowning. As a country, we celebrate our country's financial management with an 8.2% GDP growth for the 2021-2022 fiscal years, numbers as released by Staten in July. That 8.2% shows that the recovery of our country has started on a strong footing. This number, coupled with an unemployment rate of 6.2%, this is a historic low for Jamaica. There seems to be a winning formula. Our Minister of Finance stated in that other place a few months ago that, and I quote, "We need to ensure that we continue to provide protection for the most vulnerable and those impacted by global conditions who are least able to absorb these shocks." Being a man not known for random announcements which lack teeth or truth, this government has managed to provide in 2022 not just an initial $3.5 billion in measures to alleviate the impact of the pandemic and the war and all the fallouts from these events, but also in more recent months, there has been additional expenditures which seek to ensure appropriate demographic diversity with the extra spending from the country's coffers. Mr. President, I could go on further with the conversation about Jamaica and her economic management, economic growth, and economic future, but I will leave it to my colleagues on this side who cover these areas on a daily basis. Mr. President, I look forward to hearing Senator Don Webby and our Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Senator Hill, when they give their State of the Nation addresses and school us a little more on the performance of our economy. Mr. President, in thinking about the economy and finances of this country, I was reminded that in the 1970s and maybe up to the early 2000s, one could say, without any fear of contradiction, that Jamaica's two political parties were clearly separated by ideology. The Jamaica Labour Party was considered and operated primarily as a capitalist movement, while the People's National Party was more socialist-leaning. Today, in Jamaica, there does not exist as clear an ideological line as to which party leans capitalist and which socialist. To me, that is not a bad thing, as divides are never good, especially for smaller nation states with less than 150 years of independence. Jamaica, unlike many other developing nations across the world, is not divided by clans or tribes. We are but one people, and the divide of politics that we have created for ourselves has not served us well in the past and does not augur well for our people and country moving into the future. That said, it is important for there to be an ideological path to follow when one leads, as it provides a beacon of direction. When there is an aim and an objective, it is easier to stay the course of prosperity and to not be derailed by distractions that ultimately lead to potential failure. Listening to our Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Michael Holness, and his cabinet, and seeing how they govern and where the focus is, Mr. President, I believe Jamaica is following the philosophy of Marcus Garvey, Jamaica's first national hero. By the way, his birthday was only a few weeks ago on August 17th. Had he been alive, Marcus Mosiah Garvey would have been 135 years old. Marcus, the child of a stonesman and a domestic servant, left the world with a clear philosophy for those who choose to listen and to read. Up to the time of his death in June 1940, Garvey believed that as a people we could be more. He believed that through education, a door could be opened for all, no matter from whence one came. He believed in unity, self-pride, and in purpose towards larger goals for self, people, and country. Mr. President, I see today's governance of Jamaica in this light. Garvey was committed to the idea of self-reliance, and what better ways to be self-reliant than to be educated and economically strong. Yeah, yeah. In his work, Philosophy and Opinions, Garvey asserted, "Chance has never yet satisfied the hope of a suffering people. Action, self-reliance, the vision of self and the future have been the only means by which the oppressed have seen and realized the light of freedom." This, Mr. President, is what I see happening within Jamaica. Very few, if anything, is happening by chance. Instead, we see a vision from this government for what Jamaica can and could be through steadfast action. Earlier, I spoke about what was happening in our economy. Those actions currently being taken aim to satisfy the hope of the everyday Jamaican who had a hard time and who want nothing more than betterment for themselves and their loved ones. Whether it be through the National Social Housing Program and its distribution of houses, the changes in the education sector, and the work of Minister Favour Williams and her team, or with the Ministers of Finance and their teams, I spot the ideology of Marcus Garvey. Mr. President, as part of the recent Emancipendence celebrations, there was a celebration of the birth of Marcus Garvey. His son, Dr. Julius Garvey, was here in Jamaica on the invitation of the Ministry of Gender, Entertainment and Sports. And I had the pleasure of being his chauffeur as we moved from event to event spanning locations in Kingston and the birth parish of his father, St. Anne. I will forever treasure the memories of the conversations we had. But outside of that, what has stayed in the forefront of my mind is an event we attended hosted at King's House. It was the award ceremony for the Marcus Garvey Public Sector Graduate Scholarship Program. What a joy and pride it was to see civil service recipients who would be heading off to pursue postgraduate studies at some of the world's top universities with the objective to learn, grow, and return and make our country's civil service stronger and better. The initiative behind the scholarship, it is said, aims to unearth latent potential within the public sector to the advancement of the Government of Jamaica's whole of government core deliverables against a changing global landscape. This administration has set aside funds to ensure that up to 30 civil servants per year can be afforded this opportunity to not only retool themselves, but also contribute to the development of Jamaica in a way where they probably would not have been able to do so before pursuing their particular postgraduate studies. Marcus Garvey no doubt will be proud that his name is lent to this scholarship, which aims to build a cadre of civil servants who will help to reform the sector and bring our civil service on par with that of countries we have often admired for their well-organized civil service. Mr. President, while I'm on the issue of education, and we keep in mind the words of Garvey on education, he said, "It is by education that we become prepared for our duties and responsibilities in life." It is important that I mention a few things about the Jamaica Teaching Council bill that is before a joint select committee of this Parliament. First, as the daughter of a now retired teacher, I am proud to sit on that joint select committee, as I know I am part of something bigger and greater than myself. It is also a fact that change is never easy, and this change, which intends to revolutionize the system and make places of learning safer and better for our children, I know is causing some angst in some quarters. But I am confident, having read the bill a few times for myself, that there will be no regrets when this bill becomes law and is actioned across the education sector. The submissions and presentations to the committee have already aided not just the thinking of members, but also some of them have helped to identify gaps that the relevant teams are now working to fill. Mr. President, the process of joint select committees in the Parliament, the process works. I use the opportunity to remind my fellow Jamaicans that you can have a voice in the making of laws. Call the Parliament and get the information as to which bills are being deliberated and submit your comments. Even better, ask for an opportunity to present your take on matters before the committee. It is your right and it is your privilege to listen. On the matter of the Jamaica Teaching Council bill and the response from some quarters and the fears expressed, there should be no fear of large penalties for pretending to be a teacher when one is not certified to do so. There should be no fear of having to submit a police record to show that one is fit to be in the classroom with our children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. There should be no fear of someone reporting the matter when they know that someone has returned to Jamaica from abroad where they hold a criminal record. There should be no fear of asking that individuals be certified in order to teach our children. Jamaica's children deserve the best.
What you are suggesting almost a degree of the implementation of the sub judice rule. That is to say, where a matter is before the courts for consideration. Hold on. You're suggesting that there is a similar rule in relation to matters before joint select committees. And I'm telling you, I know of no such rule. However, listen, having said that, Minister, you have something to show me? No, I know, that's what I said. Having said that, then I'm sure that the Speaker will take some caution from what you have said. Okay? Senator? Yes, no, but there is a rule. All right. Yes, I know. Members, Senator Brown. I'm not said anyway. We can continue. Continue, my lady.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jamaica's children deserve the best, and Jamaica's teachers deserve the best, because Jamaica is the best when systems are in place to guide and protect each citizen to be prepared for life. Mr. President, I'll move on to the general area of youth development. We tend to say youth are the future, but in reality, youth cannot have a bright future or be bright for our country if we do not give them the tools and exposure they need in the now. As a former director of youth in Jamaica, I believe we can do more to strengthen our young people's abilities to move forward, help them to not fall prey to violence, help them to not become perpetrators of criminal activities or to become victims for any reason. Mr. President, youth development needs to be prioritized in a meaningful way with a joint whole-of-government approach. Youth development should not be approached in a token or social welfare manner, and I take this opportunity to make a few recommendations. Firstly, while the National Youth Service is now a part of the Heart Trust NTA, I think it needs to be revamped to allow for more meaningful and worthy opportunities for persons in the age range of 21 to 28. The expansion of schooling years as being implemented with the new sixth form program is a good first step, but more is needed. We often say that the devil finds work for idle hands. Allow for the National Youth Service to offer 5 paths in which persons can enroll and cut out the availability of idle hands for the devil to use in his work. The first of the 5 areas I'm proposing: computers, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. Secondly, military and policing. Thirdly, sports health, sports recruitment. Fourthly, entertainment management. And the 5th, plumbing and electrical works. The second recommendation I want to make is remove hairdressing, dressmaking, bartending, and masonry as the primary courses through Heart NTA for many rural and poor communities across the country. We have to help our young people to dream big and to know they can achieve and be so much more. Let robotics and coding be in these small communities, in Above Rocks, in Moko, in Bonnet. Let us not limit our young people because of where in Jamaica they're from. Thirdly, let us establish a national mentorship program, especially for males. As a country, we have a problem with absentee fatherism. Many of our boys grow up without their fathers, or with fathers who are not equipped to show model father behavior due to their own delinquencies. We see the fallout in the statistics and need to act urgently to prevent the situation from worsening. This national mentorship program would allow for participants to be assigned mentors throughout their compulsory sixth form years. They would be allowed to either find their own mentors by the October of the first year of sixth form or be assigned one from a national registry which includes males and females who have been vetted and trained in how to be mentors to youths. Mentors will not only help mentees along a path for success, but also help in identifying potential problems and finding solutions to said problems. Mr. President, if we get youth development issues sorted, It will help to significantly lessen the levels of violence and disorder occurring each day. This is without doubt a fact that needs to be taken on board today and always. In the midst of promoting economic self-reliance and a sense of self-pride, we must offer opportunities to our young people to allow them to feel they belong to the central and wider parts of society. Every young Jamaican, whether male or female, rich or poor, skinny or fat, JLP or PNP leaning, from a rural community or an urban one, must feel a sense of pride in the fact that they exist without bias and with opportunities in their country. The development of this sense in our young people is an end in itself, as it serves to build dignity and pride, which ultimately leads to a greater willingness to participate in society and accept its norms and values. That participation will lead to lower levels of criminal activities, disorder, and chaos, something we can all agree is needed. Mr. President, in his 2022 independence message, the Prime Minister stated, and I quote, "I know that many Jamaicans are deeply disturbed by the high levels of violence and disorder in our domestic and public interactions. Security and public safety, law enforcement, and public order are priority concerns for Jamaicans. Our society has changed much faster than the legislative framework necessary to preserve social order. At the time of our independence, we did not contemplate the level of access to weapons and the rampant use of violence and offenses against the person. We did not foresee drugs and human trafficking, cybercrimes and scamming, or the pervasiveness of criminal gangs on an enterprise scale." In speaking on the issue, the Prime Minister reminded that the problems did not occur overnight, but resulted from a growth over a 30-year period. It is important for us to keep this in mind, as it reminds us that the solutions need to be multifaceted and, in most instances, long-term. Quick fixes will not work for problems with deep tentacles in the fabric of our society. He further committed to the administration developing a series of legislation to address social order issues that are now so prevalent. The list of legislation mentioned, I will speak to them, and the reason I'm doing so is for it to be remembered that we know the laws need to be changed in many instances, and work is being done to get it to happen. The first one the Prime Minister mentioned, the new road traffic regulations, which was recently passed and will come into effect later this year. I know that everything will be done by the relevant entities to ensure enforcement of these regulations. Enforcement is always where we fall off, and there is a commitment that we must enforce the rules and laws once they are passed. I take this opportunity, Mr. President, to ask, is it possible for a military policing cadre of National Youth Service participants to be trained to help with the enforcement of these regulations? Our roads need order, and the regulations are detailed and quite a hefty book. We must work to ensure that action is lifted from its pages and not stay on the pages while the books are used to catch doors. The second piece of legislation, the Firearms Prohibition, Restriction and Regulation Act 2022, which was passed in the lower house on, I think, Wednesday of this week. And this piece of legislation sets out an effective way of dealing with the proliferation, trade, and use of firearms. This is another set of laws expected to come into effect this year. The increased penalties for possession and use of firearms is expected to make a significant dent in the use of these deadly weapons, which wreak havoc on families and businesses in this country. The New Bail Act, an Enhanced Security Measures Act, a revised Zones of Special Operations Act, the Offences Against the Persons Act, those will also be reviewed, along with the Sexual Offences Act and the Domestic Violence Act. To quote Prime Minister Holness, all these will create a robust and modern framework relevant to the issues at hand to secure social order. What an incredible moment in our history it will be, Mr. President, when these pieces of legislation are reviewed, passed, and come into effect. Mr. President, what I'm about to speak on next is somewhat controversial, but I think it is so important that it needs to be said. Mr. President, I speak of the thousands of Jamaicans who fall under the grouping of lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgender people, and those living with HIV/AIDS, whose dignities are violated on an almost daily basis. These groups are worth a few minutes of the many minutes I speak today. I take a quote from a document put out by J-Flag. The situation for LGBTQ people in Jamaica is dire, as many community members are routinely deprived of their human rights and suffer from widespread discrimination, exclusion, violent attacks, joblessness, and a distinct lack of legal protection, among others. The current legal framework largely excludes and fails to protect the community. In a 2019 study, it was found that 72% of the LGBT Jamaicans had experienced some form of violence in their lifetime. The most common form of violence experienced was verbal assaults or threats at 68.8%, followed by discrimination at 64.9%, harassment at 43.8%, and bullying at 41.8%. Let me make it quite clear. This is not government-sanctioned hardships that these groups of Jamaicans are facing, not in the least. These hardships, however, can be helped with specific steps relating to changes with certain laws and the development of an anti-discrimination act, as well as a change in our mindsets and how we treat our fellow human beings. Mr. President, this administration has made a commitment to establish a National Human Rights Institute, which will be a step in the right direction to help the situation. As a society, we need to care for all Jamaicans. We need to not forget that it was not so long ago when people of black skin and African heritage were shunned and treated less solely on the basis of our skin color. All Jamaicans matter. Lord Bedford Pym in the British Parliament in the 1800s during a debate said, "What God has made unequal, acts of Parliament can never make equal." Throughout history, people have used God and claimed that what is in the Bible is the reason for their bias. Mr. President, Lord Pym was arguing against the abolition of slavery and claiming the will of God to be the reason for his position. Just a reminder for each of us. Each of us can do something to help the discrimination faced by people in the LGBT and persons living with HIV/AIDS communities. Here are a few suggestions. 1, encourage that the problems in the clinics which do not allow for privacy when persons living with HIV/AIDS must visit be fixed. A simple thing such as getting security guards and nurses to not call out loudly what persons are at the clinic for would go a long way. Medicines are needed for persons living with HIV to keep healthy, and many stop doing so to save themselves the shame and indignity they feel within the public health system. Those of us in this House can meet with persons living with and affected by HIV/AIDS to hear about their experiences and pledge support to address the negative issues such as access to treatment as well as stigma and discrimination. We can encourage the use of male and female condoms and encourage everyone to safeguard their health. The NGO and international community working with the LGBTQ and the persons living with HIV/AIDS communities can make greater efforts to educate on the complex interplay between national laws, policies, and issues of protection from discrimination, prevention, and support. We must work together to solve the problems and bridge the gaps. There is no need for confrontation, finger-wagging, or any such thing. Fifthly, Jamaica needs a transition safe house for persons living with HIV/AIDS. Can the private sector partner to help make this happen? How do we give dignity to this group of persons? Who will bite the bullet and make dignity and doing what's right a priority over fear and boom-bye-byeism? 6, review laws on the books which make discrimination precedent. possible. Mr. President, in order to make Jamaica her best, all hands are needed on deck in all situations. Now, Mr. President, I turn my attention to our athletes and our entertainers. These two groups bring jubilation, excitement, and promote brand Jamaica by their mere existence on the local and global stages. Mr. President, the Jamaican national anthem, in my opinion, rings most powerfully when it is sung in the national stadium at a sporting event or in a stadium anywhere in the world. We cannot pay too much respect and honor to those who don the green, black, and gold to represent our country, all while representing themselves, their high levels of discipline, their hard work, and commitment to their profession. So too our entertainers, who, while doing their jobs to earn and to entertain, keep Jamaica relevant as a place to visit and spend money, which in turn helps families across all spectrums of the society. In addition to earning potential, the music from reggae and dancehall provides social commentary and enjoyment to not just Jamaicans at home and abroad, but to a wide cross-section of people on every continent. I am yet to visit a country and not hear at least one song from a Jamaican artist being played on a corner, in an entertainment establishment, in a restaurant, or in a home. Jamaica, our music, and our athletes punch above our size. In the past, the sounds associated with Jamaica were from one artist only. That legend opened the ears of the world to the rhythms and joys of music from Jamaica. Marley's work was done so well that today I hear reggae and dancehall from several different artists while traveling. All artists and entertainers need a supporting cast to help them perform at their best, whether it be managers, coaches, advisors, masseuses, organizers, social media managers, writers, or agents. It takes a team to make the magic of performance on the stage or in the sporting arena happen. It is this need for the supporting cast which feeds the suggestion I made earlier that we need a stream of National Youth Service participants who specialize in sports health, sports recruitment, and another in entertainment management. These areas should not be overlooked for inclusion, as they could boost the entertainment and sporting industries in a major way while providing lucrative career paths for young people. Mr. President, I'm nearing the end of this opening speech for the State of the Nation Debates 2022, but must go back to a question I asked before. This year, we celebrate Jamaica's 60th anniversary of independence. The question is, where would we like to see Jamaica in 2082, 60 years from now? In your speech, Mr. President, at the joint sitting of Parliament in commemoration of the 60th anniversary of Jamaica's independence, you made a point which was and is quite important. You said Jamaica has accomplished much over the past 60 years. However, I am of the view that we as a people have the capacity to underestimate and to underrate the progress we have made. I don't know if you remember saying those words, Mr. President. I agree with you, Mr. President. We are hardest on ourselves, and we do tend to undervalue how far we have come as a people and as a nation. Mr. President, you reminded us that in 1963, the literacy rate was 40%, and today it is over 91%. In 1962, and for some time after, many persons lived in wattle and daub. Today, that is far from the situation. Many do not even know what wattle and daub is. Childhood diseases were rampant at the time of our independence, and many of those illnesses are now behind us. We now, as a country, have one of the most robust childhood vaccination programs in the world. Jamaica has a highly competent and independent judicial system, as you reminded us. You actually stated, Mr. President, we have a legal system that is the envy of many. You went on, Mr. President, to remind us of our achievements with our trade union movement, that movement that has been a vehicle of development. You also reminded us of our Electoral Commission of Jamaica, an entity so highly regarded that it provides personnel to assist throughout the world with elections. You also reminded us of our vibrant private sector, our military and police force systems, which are highly competent and which we know are undergoing rapid improvement. I mention all this, Mr. President, within the context not of praising your words, but as a reminder to everyone listening that Jamaica has a lot to be proud of while working to achieve even more. Today, I've spoken already for what I think is a long time, longer than I would normally speak in any one sitting. And as a politician left to my own devices, I could go on and on and on and on, even longer. But I am aware that we do have time limits and we do respect time. As such, let me say thank you to a few persons without whom I would not have gotten this opportunity to be here today to open the State of the Nation debates. First, let me thank God for giving me life and for keeping me alive all these 47 years. 47 years. Who are we without our spiritual father? No. I also want to thank my parents, Floretta and Jefferson. I will thank them every time, especially my mother, who raised me to be loyal, self-assured, and true, and as such, letting the chips fall where they may. To my husband, Stephen, who is actually here today, and who probably is hearing me give a speech live for the first time in over 20 years. We live an unusual life, but one where we both get to thrive. Can I just say, I am proud to be married to a man who's proud to be a he for she, standing at every term for the most vulnerable and for women in the society. He for she. We can talk about it over lunch. My children, Alex and Amanda, who are off living their own individual lives, but who are probably watching on PBCJ. Thank you for making me a better version of myself. Thanks for being my on-call ride or die chicks. The Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honourable Andrew Michael Holness, the man who inspired my decision to be back to politics in Jamaica because I so believe in his vision and dreams for this country. Thank you for the confidence entrusted in me with the recommendation to appoint me to this Senate. My fellow Senate colleagues, thank you for the warm welcome to this house that you gave me 2 years ago. Thanks for the counsel provided. Thanks for the laughter and the love. Senate Leader, thanks for the level-headedness and surety you represent. El Presidente, thank you for being you and for providing feedback in a way that reminds me of my grandmother, who often spoke in parables, but the message being sent was always clear. My colleagues on the other side, thank you for everything you do for Jamaica and for helping to make me think and reflect at times, and especially the member who tests my strength and makes me more patient than I could ever be. It is all appreciated because it is everything together that creates a whole. I also want to thank our clerk and our team here at Garden House for being responsive and for providing support. Your work is appreciated. In ending, Mr. President, I leave a quote from Marcus Garvey. He said, "The ends you serve that are selfish will take you no further than yourself, but the ends you serve that are for all in common will take you into eternity." Mr. President, may it please you.
I know. Finish? You just about finished just before, Minister, just before you rise, I just want to record the condolences of all of us on the passing of Senator Webby's dad, We know that it was a bit of a shock, and we all responded to you, so we just note our condolences. And on a brighter note, in the dispatches over the independence period, it was announced that our colleague, Senator Ransford Bram, KC, was awarded the Order of Distinction Commander Class. So, Madam Clerk, in future he is to be referred to as Senator Ransford Bram, CD, KC. No, it's from now. Me? You hear what she said about our grandmother? Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. I must say that the message that translated itself to me was that you reminded her of her grandmother. And so that is what has sort of stuck. But you're always gracious, Mr. President. And allow me to congratulate Senator Campbell-Rodriques on her first opening of the State of the Nation. I know it's something that circulates. And on her wide-ranging suggestions, in particular with a focus on youth development and how it is that the National Youth Service can be improved to deliver even greater cross-cutting benefit to Jamaica's socioeconomic development. Mr. President, today it is not proposed to do any further business, and it may well be that we will not sit next week. So I would just, without giving formal notice, ask, and I have raised it with Senator Bunting, as to whether we could consider sitting on 2 days in the following week, should that period be required to take the firearms bill through all its stages. Should it be sufficient to sit for 1 day, then we would sit on the normal Friday, but just to signal that the government is proposing 2 days in the week of the 19th to ensure that sufficient attention is paid, 22nd and 23rd, the Thursday and the Friday, should that be deemed necessary. That is the 2 days of debate. And with that, Mr.
In discussion with Senator Bunting.
Yes, I've opened discussions with him on that matter, but just signaling so that the bill had been attached to the report, which was tabled prior to the summer recess, and it has not been amended and has been tabled as passed and as had been circulated before. So we feel that sufficient opportunity has been provided for members to familiarize themselves, and therefore hope that the debate will reflect the same. So, Mr. President, it is not intended to do any further business. If Senate could be adjourned. Prior to adjourning the Senate, Mr. President, allow me to move for suspension of the State of the Nation debate until a date to be fixed.
The question is that the State of the Nation debate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor?
Aye.
Against?
And allow me to ask for the adjournment of the Senate for a date to be fixed.
Members would have heard the question, specifically that the that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? This Honourable Senate now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.
The NITS enrollment process is easy as 1, 2, 3. In order to enroll into the NITS, an applicant must be a citizen of Jamaica or ordinarily resident for 6 months and above. Persons must submit documents such as birth certificate, proof of address, or marriage certificate. Step 1. Applicants will be able to pre-enroll online or visit the nearest enrollment center. Step 2. Applicants' biometric data and supporting documents are collected at an enrollment site. A reference number will be given for the applicant to track the application online. Step 3. Once the verification is done, a notification will be sent to the applicant to collect, pin, and activate their national identification card. The process is now completed, and your ID card can now be used to verify your identity.
You know, plan to support the referendum up, improve the ball field.
Where we are going? After I'm batting on the prize.
Youth, worry yourself. For once it's a good cause, nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong. It have to be approved by the Betting, Gaming and Lotteries Commission before anybody get my hard-earned money.